Howdy, y'all. Let's get started, shall we?
Of course we shall. Now, this is part 2 of an ongoing series. I might actually make this one of my timeless videos. That is, tag it as timeless so I can use it for future terms. But enough of that. This is Sisseton, Wahpeton College, Native Literature, with your brilliant host, Professor Victor Singingeagle. And today we have a special lecture talking about Freytag's Pyramid. F-R-E-A-K. What? No, wrong song. No, Freytag's Pyramid has to do with the plot lines in stories, you see. And as this is a literature class, let's get started. I'm going to walk you through this book. We have been reading Read, Listen, Tell, and the very first assignment in this book is Way of the Sword by Dumont. I think I posted one of her videos because she is a native, I believe she's Cree up there in Canada, but she's also an American. Born and raised in Saskatchewan. Ooh, that's close. From the Okanese First Nation. I used to hang out there. Never mind, focus. So, how come I never met her? Never mind. So, right. She's from there, and she is... I shouldn't just stand up here and preface it. Let's read a little bit. Dumont has no trouble bringing her prodigious talents as a comedian to the page, while also using her sharp wit to make us think more deeply about serious issues, such as the legacy of residential schools, poverty, racism, and that's enough of that, bullying. Now, I'm going to read what she has here. It says, when I was growing up, my hero was Conan the Barbarian. He wasn't just a comic book character. Conan was a way of life. A very simple way of life. When Conan wanted something, he took it. When someone stood in his way, he slew them. There were no annoying gray areas when you were a barbarian. Uncle Frank introduced me, my siblings, and all my cousins to Conan. He arrived from Manitoba one day with a bag filled with clothes and a box full of comics. I was 10 and had no idea who Uncle Frank was. This is your uncle, Mom said, pointing to the thin man with no hair sitting next to her at the table. Yeah, hi. Okay, I said, breezing by as I polished an apple on my t-shirt. I would have kept walking had I not overheard the words horse ranch. I stopped short, reversed, and sat to my uncle's right as he laid out the plans for possibly the greatest single thing that has ever happened to the Okanese Reserve, Uncle Frank's Ranch. So here we are setting it up. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. I asked in a previous video. This fella, Freytag, I believe he is German. He's from like the 1800s or something like that, a long time ago. And he says that most stories, doesn't matter, universally, are going to follow this pyramid. Can we apply it? That was my challenge question to you. Can we apply it to native literature? We'll see. So I believe Freytag would say, well, right now we're at the exposition point of our story. We're laying the scene. And for those of you who are literature nerds, this is called setting. Setting is essentially time and place. Time plus place equals setting. That's a nice literary term you all need to know. So we're setting our scene. We're doing the setting, and that's the exposition phase according to Freytag, or his name means Friday. Now, we're supposed to move on over to the inciting incident. Let's keep reading. So, Uncle Frank, he got the kids into Conan. Uncle, I'm going to skip down to the bottom. This is page 15 for those of you who are following along. Uncle Frank had hundreds of Conan comics from various different series. You see, Conan led such a long and complex life that it had to be told from several different angles. There was Conan the Barbarian, Conan the King, young Conan, and the Savage Sword of Conan. The Savage Sword was my favorite because it was more of a graphic magazine than a comic book. On these pages, the artist took extra time and care to bring Conan's heroic form, stylized muscles, and the blood splatters of his foes. These stories were savored. Each word would be read, each panel would be studied to achieve maximum Conan absorption. So here we're starting to get our inciting incidents a little bit, maybe according to Freytag. Let's keep going. I'm going to skip down the magazines. We learned all we needed to know about Conan and his life's philosophies. I'm going to jump all the way to page 17. Once we had owned all of Canada, she's talking about her tribe, especially the Cree, the Plains Cree in particular, page 17. Once we had owned all of Canada, now we lived on tiny reserves. While reserves weren't as bad as, say, a slave labor camp run by Stygian priests, sometimes life was reduced to survival. Like Conan, all we had was our swords and our wits. And if we weren't allowed to bring our swords to school, then we would use our fists. Remember, these are little girls. I got to quit editorializing. There was an unspoken belief among the native kids that we would fight to defend our people should anyone decide to annihilate us again. As Conan once said as he incited a group of slaves to overthrow their master, "I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees." I'm trying to imitate Schwarzenegger. Never mind, focus. I think other people have also said this, most notably Mel Gibson in Braveheart. Next part. My sister and I made swords out of tree branches and practiced our sword play in the backyard. "Today I'm Conan," she announced proudly. "No, you're the evil wizard," I replied. I refused to be the evil wizard because of my dark brown skin and, well, evil personality. I worried I might be typecast.
"You were Conan yesterday." "That's because I'm bigger."
"No, just fatter." Thunk! Our swords met, and the resulting explosion reverberated up our arms. It did not matter that Conan was a man and we were girls. We were all Conan in spirit. Besides, in the barbarian world, women were just as good fighters as men. Conan had several female sidekicks who fought alongside him and who often became his lovers. So I'm thinking if this Freytag's pyramid is correct, we're going to say we're still in this area here. We haven't really got to we might even be starting to move up here to raising action, because she did lay the scene about being at school and defending native honor because these are tiny reservations or reserves up in Canada. Similar to the ones in California, which are called rancherias. They're tiny, and some of them are about the size of this campus. Let's change to page 18. Here we go. At school, natives were assigned the role as the ASS kickers. Even if you were a girl, you were expected to be tough as a boy. And if you grew up on a reserve, you were doubly tough. In grade 1, when the girls in the class decided to punish the boys, they enlisted my help as the only native girl in class. "You're tough, Dawn. Go beat up Matt. He's being mean to us," they cooed in my ear. How did they know I was tough, I wondered. I'd never fought anyone in class. I'd never fought anyone outside my immediate family. Perhaps they could sense my Cimmerian blood pumping through my veins. So we're starting to see some call to action here, but we haven't gotten there yet. So this is still I'm going to jump on over to page... about Crystal. This is on page 20. You ready? Here we go. Page 20, Crystal. All right. Several years passed in which I did nothing to prepare for my next bloody entanglement except read more Conan magazines. My next fight occurred in the 7th grade. There were many bullies at my school that year. Older girls who gave you the mean eye and who looked for reasons to exercise their already honed fighting skills, and younger girls looking to establish themselves as toughs. There were even aspiring Dawn Kings who went about their day trying to promote fights among the girls. One of the tough older girls decided that I had called her a bad name, and she stalked me in the hallways for weeks. Her name was Crystal, and she was 3 years older than me. She was a single mom, bravely going back to school to make something out of herself and for her child. She kept getting distracted by her frequent smoke breaks, make-out sessions with the bus driver, and her love of terrorizing the younger girls. So we're describing this girl. We're getting to the rising action. Krista wasn't extraordinarily big or muscular, but she was rumored to be fierce and a merciless fighter. She wore a lot of makeup and had feathery haircut tailored to hide her acne-scarred forehead. I became aware of her dislike for me gradually. I'm going to skip over to page 21. One day she approached Crystal. She says, Crystal, are you angry with me? I asked her one afternoon. I was nervous. Still, I managed to keep my voice relatively normal. However, I had no idea what to do with my hands. They moved around me as I spoke, settling on my hips for a second before migrating towards my tummy. Crystal pressed her chest up against mine. I took a step back, partly from fear, partly from a natural aversion to touching boobs with another woman. Yeah, I am. Got a problem with that? No, well, yes. I mean, you can have a problem with me if you want to. Was my voice sounding like I'd sucked back a liter of helium? I cleared my throat. I guess I'm just wondering, what did I do? You know, she snarled. I looked around at the people watching our exchange. A crowd of teenagers had gathered, attracted to the smell of conflict. Everyone seemed to be glaring and shaking her head at me. Yes, she is exactly the type of person who would do something and then pretend like she didn't know. Their accusatory eyes said. Skipping on over to page 20, said here she fallen down a rabbit hole. She says, you must be mistaken. You called me a bitch. No, I didn't. So now I'm a liar, huh? I'm not calling you a liar. And then we're going to skip over to page 22. So we're setting the scene. I'm going to skip over to where she has the chat with her father. And I'm going to go faster because I probably already spoke for 20 minutes. We're getting close to the climax now. This is going to be an interesting climax. She's going to her dad, you see, because she's worried. She wants to talk to her dad and get advice from dad, and dad is kind of a cool joker himself. I believe she got her goofy sense of humor from her dad. So, I think I have, this is page 23. I think I have consulted my dad exactly once in my life. And this was that one time. When I approached, he was watching television in the big chair. I sat next to him on the couch and laid out the problem to him during commercial break. Dad realized the import of the situation and turned down the TV. He took a deep, restful breath as he leaned back in his chair. When I was at school, there was a bully. He smiled, as he often did whenever he thought about his childhood. He was a big guy, a boxer. My dad had attended residential school. He had been raised in it. He had started when he was 7 years old and had been accelerated 2 grades by the time he finished his first year. He graduated at the age of 17 and went to business college until his grandfather, the chief of the reserve, Reserve asked him to come home and manage the band's affairs. We knew this via my mother, who always relayed everything about my dad. If we hadn't had her, we wouldn't know anything about the dark-haired man who ate all the bacon and insisted we watch hockey on Saturday nights. My dad continued with his story with a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. Yada, yada, yada. He's talking about how the dad, the bully or the guy he was fighting in school was a provincial champ. He got so good, nobody wanted to fight with him. I know how you like to be on time, blah, 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 blah. More than that, he's telling a story to his daughter to try to help her cheer up and to buck up because she's being she's scared, and he wants to comfort his daughter in the goofy way that a practical, joking, silly dad might want to do. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom of page 23. Let's see. Where is it? It wasn't even a lace boxer coming to the ring. His friend was still lacing when I made my move. I ran across that ring, pulled back my arm, and punched him right in the nose. My dad sat back in triumph. When did you beat him up? I didn't. I threw off my gloves and ran out the ring. So Dad is laughing now. He says he pulled a punch on it. What do they call pull a punch? Where you fight dirty. He beat up the bully before the bully could even. Dad, wasn't that a cowardly thing to do? Top of page 24. My dad looked not a bit embarrassed. It's not like I had a chance against him. You cheated. Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter if you beat a bully. You only have to let them know you won't go down easily. Now here was something that made sense. Don't go down easy. That was easier to do than win at all costs, especially since winning at all costs might scar me for life. I took my dad's advice to heart and resigned myself to fighting the bully. We're going to skip on down to the middle of page 24, and she runs across the bully. Ooh, here we go. She's outside the bingo hall, one of the tribal bingo halls. It's a big thing up in Canada. A few days later, my sister and I were outside a bingo hall again when the next battle occurred. We were teenagers. We had the teenage ability to walk through middle of town without supervision. She must be Generation X. Which suited my mom and us just fine. My sister and I had escaped from the front door of the bingo hall as 3 native girls were going in. Excuse me, I said politely.
Why, did you fart?
Retorted one of the girls. It was an old diss, one that I had even used myself on occasion. However, instead of dismissing it as such, I rose to the bait. Maybe you're smelling yourself, I shot back as I kept walking. My sister and I thought nothing of the encounter as we returned to the conversation, which I'm sure was about boys. And then I'm going to skip on down. As the girls are doing their girl stuff, a little kid comes up. This is page 25. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and saw a young boy standing there.
My sister wants to fight you.
He pointed over his shoulder at a group of girls. My eyesight wasn't the best, especially as I refused to wear glasses in an attempt to make my parents get me contact lenses. As a result, the group of girls could have been anywhere from 4 to 20, depending on their individual size and breadth. All I knew from gazing at their amorphous, hateful mass was that they did not like me. My heart immediately began to pound. It was the age-old fight or flight response kicking in. Oh, we're getting to the rising action. We're getting to the climax, maybe, according to Freytag. Let's see, where was I? I wanted to run out of the arcade and back to the bingo hall to cower next to my mom. My pride and the tightness of my jeans prevented that. I cleared my throat as it had suddenly become thickened with fear. Tell her I'm not afraid to face her on the field of battle, that I will not lie down and allow her bullish stock to rule the world, that here on earth remain a precious few who will stand up for what is right, what is wrong, and what is pure. He rolled his eyes at the tremor of my voice. When? Anytime, any place. Can you pick one? She's the one who wants to fight. She can make the arrangements. He sighed and returned to his sister's side. I turned back to the Pac-Man game and pretended to be calm. What was that about? Celeste asked. Some girl wants to fight me, I replied casually, as if I fought every day, while inside my colon and spine were melting. Celeste and Kimmy nodded as if they too were approached to fight every day of their lives. My mind began to analyze the situation with military precision. Numbers unknown, fighting area unknown, fighting strength limited, courage too low to gauge. Now we're going to skip on over. Remember now, I don't always like to read to students, but when I do, I have a purpose. Right. This is page 20. We're getting to the climax. I'm going to skip the dirty language. My sister continued playing her game. 27. I could walk outside and juggle a few rocks, jump on down. How many girls were there? 6? I asked Celeste under my breath. There's 8, she replied. 8? My voice squeaked out. Then one girl stepped out in the front of the group. This is middle of page 27. She was little more than a blur to me. I got the sense of long, dark hair and square shoulders. You ready to fight? My enemy drawled. Her voice came out loud and brash. I'm ready. My voice sounded thin and shaky, like it had been drawn through a hose. The girl and her friends laughed. You sound scared. You want to call this off? This was my chance. I could not back down now. Make a silly joke and walk away as if nothing had ever happened. Page 28. The girl and her backup fighters approached Celeste and me. Remember, I whispered to Celeste, you have to let them hit you first, otherwise you can be charged with assault. This was an urban legend currently circulating among teenagers. I'm going to keep growing. Let me see. We're getting to the climax. As the girls got closer, my heart rate began to slow, as if readying myself for the battle that was ahead of us. It was almost as if my body knew what to do. I can do this, I thought to myself. Just a deep voice rang through the air. I can do this. Hey! Every eye turned toward the right. In the doorway of the laundromat, there stood a tall, dark-haired woman. Her long black hair outlined a tough, masculine face. It was through a Sumerian woman that had been. It was as though a Sumerian woman had been transported through space and time to the streets of this Saskatchewan Valley town. You girls want trouble? She crossed the distance from the laundromat in 2 steps with her tree trunk legs. I had no idea which side she was on until she came to stand in front of my sister and me. She stared into the face of my enemy. My enemy stared back with widening eyes. In a low, quiet voice, our Cimmerian growled, Which one of you has a problem with my cousin? I love being Indians. I love Indians. This is page 28, right in the middle. The lead girl thought to save her dignity. Not your cousin, just this girl, she said, pointing at me. I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't even sure who this barbarian woman was. I hoped we were related. They're all my cousins, the Cimmerian shot back. Yeah, all right. My enemy nodded, as if they had made a deal that was to her liking. She backed away into the crowd. They absorbed her as a group. Could that be our climax? Save! Sometimes, by the way, those of you who love literature, we might call this, or the Greeks, or, probably the Greeks might call this Deus Ex Machina. Not that you need to know that, but in ancient Greeks, they were big on theater and stuff, and they'd have these big old arenas, and then they would have a lot of times in some of their plays that they would do, live action play, because they didn't have TV and movie theaters, they'd have a big play in the stage, and they'd have a elaborate setup with pulleys and stuff. And up on a platform, they'd have some guy pretending to be God or Zeus or Deus. And let's say the humans down here are fighting or getting ready to fight, or they're causing trouble, and suddenly they lower this platform down and imagine that God is descending from heaven, and that was like the machina, the machine, the pulley, the stagehands are lowering him down, and that's where it comes from, God out of the machine. In this case, our Deus ex machina might be this big tree trunk leg woman who says, "You got a problem with my cousin?" She saved the day. Deus ex machina. A stronger, more powerful, more wiser character comes out of the blue and saves the day. That's a possible, legitimate look at this story. Why not? So, "Hey," I said awkwardly. Celeste hung back shyly. Freytag barely acknowledged us as she gave her cousin a quick lecture. "You girls shouldn't be fighting," she said as she wandered back into the laundromat to finish folding her laundry. I'm sure she had no idea what she'd done for us. In her eyes, falling action. In her eyes, where was I? This was a silly preteen drama, one of many that would play themselves out in the street that night. It was life-changing for me. I knew at that moment I would never be a warrior. If there were girls like Frida out there, my fighting career was over before it had begun. Even having someone like Frida on your side was frightening. So maybe Frida's the cousin. Frida ex machina. Frida, if there were girls like Frida out there, my fighting career was over before it had begun. Even having someone like Frida on your side was still frightening. Perhaps you could learn to resemble a Sumerian, but that was nothing compared to actually being one. My sister and I headed back to the bingo hall where we sat besides our mom and harassed her into buying us junk food. We never discussed our adventure, not because we were secretive. I certainly wasn't. Relating my adventures to my mom was one of the highlights of my day. I couldn't tell her this story because there was no way of telling the story that would make me look good. Perhaps Conan was not the right hero for me. Perhaps I needed a mentor who offered a peaceful alternative. Someone who did not need to prove their worth by separating a man's limbs from his body or a woman's hair from her head. There was one epic character who was currently dominating my thoughts at this time. A man who fought not with a sword, but with a great stick-handling skills. A man who would not be drawn into battle, but would only skate faster than the men who sought to bring him down. A man who defeated his enemy with goals rather than with land punches. Swiftly, my mantra changed from "what would Kona do" to "what would Wayne Gretzky do?" Now, all I had to do was learn how to skate. Dang fly! Too bad I don't have chopsticks. Never mind, that's a reference to an old movie. So, what do you think? Maybe we have this in our story. So keep that in mind. I'm going to do another one with the other story that I told you about, which is called, I think it's called Borders. I believe that's on page, let me look at my lesson plan. Borders! Borders is on page 85 of this book. I'll do this in another video because I'm out of time. I'm supposed to be getting ready for my CDL class. 85 Borders. There it is. Borders by Thomas King. I believe he's another Canadian Indian. He did spend some time in California. He's probably another dual citizen. But that's enough for now. Thank you so much for sharing some time with me. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. I bet it's 30 minutes long. Nope, 29 minutes and 43 seconds. Stop!